Well, good morning, everybody. This past weekend, many from the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains all the way to the East Coast saw their first real significant shot of colder air over the last 3 to 4 days. And I wanted to look back at the RTMA data set. Now, the RTMA, the real-time mesoanalysis data set, provides an hourly gridded product. What they do is they're taking all the service weather stations and they're resampling them to give us a high-resolution gridded view of things, which means it's going to miss some local features, but it's a pretty good data set to look at. All right, what I did with it was I just said, tell me everywhere that had a temperature at or below 32 degrees Fahrenheit over the time period of the 4th of October through yesterday, the 8th of October. And that's what's shown here in gray. So we're looking at the extent of the frost this past weekend. And it's a bit interesting to see how far to the east it made it. I'm thinking right about here. I thought we'd see more of this frost event getting into parts of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. But one night was too windy. The second night, we tried to bottom out with temperatures. In fact, I brought them up here on the observations. This is what those individual weather stations look like. And if you just come over here, you notice that when you get over into South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, down to Kansas, we hit 30. See this? There's 26, 30, 27. This is the temperature. It's always the top left number. But if you come over to parts of Minnesota, look, 34, 41, 41, 41, 42. We tended to have a little bit too windy overnight conditions, and there was still some cloud cover in places here as well. And that just prevents the strong radiational cooling. So maybe we dodged a frost in this area from this first big push at some cooler fall-like weather for a lot of folks. I do also want to point out one other thing. On Friday, I kind of made the wrong decision. Some of the high-resolution models were showing chances for snow showers here and here. And I just kind of thought sometimes the models do that. They get a little over-aggressive on where there's some snow, but it turns out there was some snow in parts of North Dakota and right here in South Dakota near the border, and I missed it, so my apologies on that. But we have seen already so far this year, this is a seasonal accumulation which starts on October 1. It shows you that we have had some pretty big snows that have come through parts of the Rocky Mountains already, and then around Yellowstone, for example. Also in the Sierra Nevada and in the Front Range, we've had some snow pack up here. We're going to be seeing more in those areas very soon. Okay, taking a look at this morning's temperatures. I'm recording this about 5:40 this morning, and we can see that we have another pretty cold one. And we still have more cold air that's going to wrap around this deeper upper level. Remember us talking a lot about that last week? Two troughs. What was left of Philippe kind of came through this area and delivered quite a bit of rainfall into this area and some colder temperatures. In fact, I'm just curious. I should have brought this up, but if we go back and we look at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation, now we can see how that's kind of come together here. So this was mostly from Lee. We had the frontal boundary that snuck into parts of New York, and we're going to be watching for some snow in this area. Most of the rest of the country spent the weekend relatively dry, and that's what we're seeing here. Okay, so next I want to show you the main features we're going to be talking about this week. Here's where that cold front has now cleared. It's all the way here into the Gulf of Mexico and out into the open Atlantic. High pressure in this area, clear skies, calm nights. That's another cold one for this part of the country. But I want to keep my eye on Lydia and now Max and what's going on in the Bay of Campeche. So if I take all these circles off here, we're going to be watching the moisture from these three events moving, first of all, out of the Bay of Campeche, then secondly, from Lydia and Max into this part of the country. And there's locally going to be some very heavy rainfall hitting some areas that were hit hard by drought this particular summer. And there's been some areas over here that have been in drought since really we began fall. So this is some critical rainfall. The second part to this is what's kind of lined up in the North Pacific. We've got multiple storm systems borne on a pretty strong North Pacific jet that are going to be racing across the country, and we need to see when and where they're going to be producing their precipitation. Now, in the wake of this broad upper level low, which is producing some very strong winds across the Great Lakes, over which I think this weekend we saw several reports of waterspouts over the lakes. In the wake of this, we're going to watch for a big area of high pressure to build into this area. And I'm going to make a comment about that and what I think the longer range forecast may be influenced by if we see more of that happening this year. But for me, just looking at what's going to be going on, I see a couple of things that are important about the Pacific jet. One, it's gaining momentum, it's gaining speed. And two, its position is shifting more poleward and it's trying to extend. Now, I love these phase diagrams. We're going to look at them a lot this winter. This comes out of University of New York at Albany. And the work that's being done here shows us just kind of an idea of where the jet stream is going to live for the next 15 days. And you can see that in this phase diagram, this is poleward, that's equatorward, that's retracted by Japan, that's extended toward the United States. We're kind of living in this space. Now, quick comment about this particular diagram. If El Nino dominates, we don't tend to see this extension of the Pacific jet. We tend to see it much farther down here. We tend to get the subtropical portion of that jet showing up. So in other words, we're seeing more of this rather than what this is saying, which is more of that. Okay, so I'll put arrows on the end of this so you can kind of see the trajectory, kind of something like this. So I just want to comment on that because we're going to continue to be observing this kind of thing. And if this does occur and this jet extension takes off like I think it will, it's going to be very important for this map. This one looks at the month of September and adds the first 8 days of October and looks at precipitation anomalies. And what this is going to do is this is going to send one part of the northern branch of the jet through like this, which means there'll be an area that's been very dry in through here that has better and better chances of getting moisture. It's also going to be wet conditions for the Pacific Northwest. And then as we watch Lydia, Max, and what comes out of the Bay of Campeche start to move in this direction, we could hit this area with a lot of very heavy rainfall. Now, tucked in between, we still are going to see dry conditions, drought conditions develop. And so that includes a lot of the Mid-South, the Tennessee Valley, parts of Missouri up to the Ohio River Valley. And that important kind of stretch of river, the Mississippi River right in through here, that's going to continue to miss out on some of the heavier rainfall. So let's go ahead and have a quick look at some of those things. I'm going to bring back up something I showed you last Friday, which is the newest drought monitor. And again, this has been an area that we've started to see some drought expand. Not really, it's just the abnormally dry category started to show up. The Ohio River Valley is the same. The long-standing drought that's been in this side of the Cornbelt and then down across the Cotton Belt and south, that's still something we're waiting on to see some correction for. But just keeping an eye on some of these bigger factors, I want to show you the latest data I've got. We're going to only go down in 16 inches this time. So this would be the 0 to 16 inch soil moisture percentile, or 0 to 40 centimeter. And what I'm suggesting is wet conditions northwest. There's going to be a system that emerges in the mid part of the country following a stagnant frontal boundary right in through here that could really help this area out for some of its soil moisture issues. And then we're also going to be watching down here for this region to pick up better moisture to work against its long-standing soil moisture issues. But that leaves a big spot in the middle here that's going to miss out. And we're going to be drier back on this side of the plains as well. California does not get into the mix with this either. So we'll take a look at that jet stream pattern in just a moment. First, though, I do want to give you the latest on the Mississippi River. The National Weather Service tweeted out over the weekend, maybe that was on Friday. Yeah, they tweeted out that the river at Memphis, since this gauge has been installed, did measure some of its lowest values. It's currently right now at 10.21 feet below low stage. I'm getting reports from some friends and colleagues that are on the river suggesting that there's barge traffic that's been broken up, like some barges have hit land and have broken up. This has really slowed things down and shut down parts of the river. And if we continue to see this, into the near term, we have major issues. There's rain coming to the headwaters of the river, but that rain is going to hit some very, very dry ground. And I'll just give you a quick case in point. Last Wednesday, where I live in East Central Illinois, one of the drier areas, and that eventually feeds into the Mississippi, we had an inch of rainfall. And by the time we got to early Friday morning, I mean, you could have driven heavy equipment over it and not put a rut in the ground. So it's still very, very dry in a lot of places. All right, I'm going to show you the Pacific first. Now, this is overnight last night, so I'm going to take you back to where the sun was up yesterday. And I just want to see the size of these storm systems on the West Coast. Let's take a look at this. Now, for reference, this is Tropical Storm Lydia. So to show you just the sheer size and magnitude, there's Tropical Storm Lydia, of these big West Coast storm systems. They're huge. You could probably put 20 of Lydias inside of this whole thing. And as it moves on shore, it is going to hit the West Coast pretty hard, especially parts of coastal Oregon, Washington, with a pretty powerful front. But what you see behind it lined up is another big push of moisture here. See this? And so we're going to watch the Pacific to kind of send these systems one after another into the west over the next 10 days. Now, how they curl up in the west is critical, and we'll show you that in a second. But I also want to point out the other features. So we're going to come down here to kind of this southern half of the United States into the Caribbean. You can see part of, of the East Pacific here. Now, this was just as the sun was rising early this morning. So I want to take you back to yesterday, Sunday. And what I'm watching is, can you see just the speed at which this cloud shield is moving? That's all being driven by some very strong upper level winds, part of the subtropical jet. Sorry, just got a new image there. And what this is going to do is this is first going to take whatever is born out of this convection and pull it first in this direction. And then Max and then Lydia get pulled into this same direction as well. So that's it. That's the two main kind of pieces of our next 7 to 8 days on the forecast. Right now, we see Lydia's forecast track to strengthen back to hurricane, maybe get up to Category 2 strength before coming right here into parts of Mexico. This is kind of bringing back some memory of 2015 when Hurricane Patricia was in this area, although it was Cat 5, much, much, much stronger. And here we have newly named Max at tropical storm strength. But the first piece you got to watch for is this one right here. And the winds guiding it look like this. Okay, so that's the base of this upper level trough. This is the subtropical jet stream. And then here comes the Pacific jet, which is going to guide the next several systems across the United States. Really just in a corridor, but right across the United States. Okay, so probabilities. Lydia, Max, there's our next chance. As we play through this week, you can see as I add each day where the probability of having a tropical depression form is increasing. So this is now at the next 10 days. So that's the feature we're going to be watching here, okay? All right, so here it is, the next 7 days of total accumulated precipitation from the WPC. Now the WPC has clearly got the two different storm tracks, one here and one here, and we're going to be looking at some relatively wet conditions moving through parts of the country that have been exceptionally dry, right in through here, and same down along our Gulf Coast and into the southeast. But you can see the corridors that are getting missed here, right? And up here in the Canadian Prairie and California. We have the potential for picking up 4 to 5 inches of rain here along the Pacific Northwest coast. And we'll be watching out later this week for the risk of strong to severe storms in this area as well, right in through here. So here it is. Let's go out and watch our first high-resolution model run. This is the high-res NAM. What you're seeing in green is liquid precipitation, and blue would be frozen. So I wanted to bring this up to show you where we're expecting snow today. In fact, it's snowing here right now this morning. As we play throughout the day today, that upper level low just continues to sit and spin. This gets us all the way into about 11 o'clock tonight, and there it is. So some lake-enhanced rainfall. There'll be clouds zipping around the edge of this and snow embedded right into here. I'll show you how much in just a few moments. We then watched as that main front comes into the Pacific Northwest by late morning, and it comes right into there delivering some heavy rain, and then enhances some of the showers that'll happen once it gets over into the mountains here in parts of eastern Oregon and Idaho. Now going through Monday night, see it down here? Keep an eye on this. We have our next frontal boundary that hits the Pacific Northwest, some snow in the Cascades. Our upper level low still sits and spins tomorrow morning, and here's that shield of precipitation that's going to start to move through southern Texas. Now this is when the piece comes out of the Bay of Campeche. See it here? And we don't typically rely on the NAM as a good tropical indicator, but we're just kind of seeing where it's trying to put down the heaviest rainfall there. So we're going to watch that very carefully. Now, could there be some rain out ahead of the deeper load that's going to eject in the mountains? Yes, it could be right into parts of Iowa, Missouri, and this side of Illinois. And that would be coming in on, Wednesday morning. That's what we're looking at here through Wednesday midday. But this is actually going to sit on, right in through here, on a front that's going to stretch right in through this area on which this next low pressure system is going to ride. It's going to live right in this area. It's going to move along the front, left behind by the upper level low here, and it's just going to sit. That's going to be the area over which we're going to have best temperature contrast. So that's where the low is going to roll. Meanwhile, you can see how much rain's hitting Louisiana. Now, Louisiana would have paid for this, a bunch of money for this back in July and August and early September. And here it is coming out finally now in the month of October. Next, I want to show you both models, the GFS and the European. These are our two flagship global models from the United States and from Europe, and we're going to watch the same setup here. So let's get through Tuesday into Wednesday and kind of look at the timing of these two things. So again, here's Wednesday evening. You can already start to see the showers showing up here on the front that trails. Here's the low, the big one that came through the Pacific Northwest. It's now delivering snow into the Rocky Mountains. And then we have our system down south, which the GFS is much more aggressive at pulling this and much wetter into Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. You can now see down here in the European, it's much farther to the south. But that moisture comes through. And you can see the difference, right? Look how much farther to the north the GFS has the heavier rain and how much farther to the south the European does. So if I'm in the southeast and I'm watching this, the GFS is giving us what we need. The European is keeping it farther to the south. But while that's all occurring, look at this front stretching out here and our new low that's ejecting. It's right here in both models. But as you can imagine, the models are not in agreement on the timing. And as we go through Thursday morning into Thursday afternoon and evening, potentially some very heavy snow coming into the Rockies. And the GFS much quicker with ejecting the low. It's already in Iowa by Friday at 7 a.m. If you look over here at the European, it's still sitting over like Lincoln, Nebraska. And as we play this forward, we're going to see something that's going to be quite common from now all through winter. You're going to watch the GFS move systems faster than the European. But this is Friday. Now, did you see where that low went? It just lived right on that frontal boundary. And that's where it is by Friday night, getting into Saturday morning, and playing through the day on Saturday into Sunday. Now, after that leaves, our next big storm system comes in from the North Pacific here. This will be next week. So we'll have another kind of setup just to bring systems across the country during that time period. If we add it all up, let's just use the high-res European model to get a best sense on this precipitation. I think it's got the timing better. Let's play out through Friday. We'll stop it there. That's a 5-day forecast. So this will be late in the week when this comes out, but locally very heavy rainfall and the risk of strong to severe storms right here in this region. It's called the triple point of this cyclone. Now we also look down here south from southern Texas along the Gulf Coast. You can see how wet it's going to be, but remember the GFS much wetter farther to the north. Let's then play past this weekend and get into early next week. And we're going to see the next system coming into the Pacific Northwest. And let's go ahead and take this out 10 days. Did you see at the very end? There's another system that's moving along that same track. I'm talking right in through here. All right, I wanted to show you the snowfall side of this. Let's go look at the European model first and play this out. I'm just going to quickly put it out there. So we're looking up here at 4 to 5 inches of snow, possibly much heavier snows here, coming out possibly even into Nebraska and into South Dakota with this next system that's leaving. The GFS has got, there we go, got the same thing, although it's locally putting out some very heavy snow right in through this corridor here and much more snow here into parts of Ontario and Quebec as well. Let's go look at some probabilities, though. I'm going to start on the liquid side of this. This is the chance of getting an inch in the next 10 days. So, I mean, it's just these two corridors we've been talking a lot about. Best chance of getting over 2 inches, primarily going to be confined to the Pacific Northwest, getting all the way down to Northern California. Then with the tropical push coming through here, but not that high of a chance into this area. And our wettest areas, just to kind of keep an eye, best chance of 4 inches. So locally, some very, very, just heavy precipitation. Drier side of it, this map now shows us chances of getting less than half of an inch. So we're now picking out those drier regions from like North Carolina to the mid-south, so much of the southern plains into the southwest, and then the Canadian Prairie, you're too far north of the main flow here. But let's flip this over for some winter probabilities, and let's just say who's got the best chance at getting an inch of snow. So over the next 10 days, this is our best chance at an inch. So we're now seeing the ensembles pulling that snow out into parts of South Dakota, Wyoming, and Nebraska. And then if we go after 3 inches, I mean, there could be some heavier snow with that system coming through. So this is something we're going to watch for all week. Keep a close eye on this. Okay, what's the upper level pattern doing? I mentioned earlier some feature I want you to watch. It's this right here. That blocking high could be This could be an indicator of something we might see a lot this winter. And my reasoning for that is all based on El Nino, the Indian Ocean Dipole, and the MJO behavior, which we talked extensively about on Friday. Keep an eye on this. If that's something we see on repeat, it may move east, it may move west, but blocking ridges here are going to be critical. Now, what this is doing in the near term is keeping Canada dry, and all the systems dip to the south. Like that's the big potent low Wednesday to Thursday that develops, that then rips across the Midwest. But then you see what's north of it. This is technically a high over low setup. cutting this low off, slowing it down. That's why I think the European model is more correct on the speed. So therefore, it takes maybe an extra 12 hours to cross the country. But then what this does is it keeps troughs here and troughs there. That high keeps troughs here and here. So that's playing through early next week. And getting out there farther, we see it fading a bit. And that means the pattern's going to progress, and it's going to stay open. It's going to keep flowing. But I want to watch for those high pressure cells to sit in this area as we press through October into November and December. All right, what is it going to do in the near term? Well, week 2 flips over back drier. See, I still think we're seeing this week on, week off type setup, right? You get a system roll through, and then it dries out again. And then see, the next one's loading up here. This is week 2, beginning to be wet again in the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to watch that progression go through as well. So I still think we're going to see that for the remainder of October. Now, what will it do on the temperature side of things? Well, this morning we do have the the frost advisories that are out, freeze warnings up north, and here it's also in the Appalachian Mountains. They've got that as well. So from this point, let's go out and look at where the potential is for frost. And I don't mean to ignore this. There's actually the chance of getting some pretty chilly temperatures down here in parts of North Carolina as well. But this was the forecast for frost over the next 7 days. So now we're looking at the forecast here versus where we started this video with what would already happened. And this is what the minimum temperatures are expected to do. So again, watching right in through here, the Appalachian Mountains, and then of course, this whole region for some cold temperatures this morning. Now going from Monday into Tuesday, look at that shot. That's still coming around the big upper level low. That's what this is. But there's warmth in the west. And it's got to push into the central United States by Wednesday, Thursday. Now look, this is where the warm sector opens. This is where the trailing front lives. So this is where we're going to keep an eye out for our stronger storms later this week. It's going to be probably a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, really Wednesday and Thursday setup. The warm sector continues to push, but behind it, Saturday into Sunday, that's our next big push of colder air. On the high temperature side of things, take a look. Here's today's highs. Getting into Tuesday, look at the warmth here while the next round of colder air comes into the northwest. This is all cloud cover driven down here, but very warm back up into the 90s in parts of Kansas. You just have to drive, well, this is a long drive, but we drop off 40 degrees by the time we get up into North Dakota. So it's a big contrast. You can see right where that front lives. See it? And there's the cold front. So this is the warm frontal boundary, the cold front. Watch the triple point for the risk of strong to severe storms. And then behind this, the next big shot of cold air comes in. The west makes a bit of a recovery. And we're going to watch another weekend of cold air in the eastern half of North America. Now, what we expect to see is this. Next 5 days, sliding through day 5 through 10. And again, we tended to see more mild conditions west, but a lot of cooler air occupying the central part of October and east. Now, I got asked over the weekend, is October our setup, man? In other words, is October telling us what winter's going to look like? No, it's not. We do not look at Octobers in the way that they behave and say, oh, this is what the rest of winter's going to be like. October's a transition season. So while we're seeing a lot of cold air east now, and it's going to be there for a while, remember, my big picture is I think we're going to see a whole lot more lower pressure, lower heights, deeper troughs west once we get into winter. And I'm basing that entirely off of the Indian Ocean dipole, off of El Nino and the MJO position right now. And I'm telling you why I'm doing those things. Cannot talk yet about the polar vortex with any confidence. The way the sea ice expands in the Arctic, not yet. I can't get up there and make a judgment call on it. I have yet to see how systems form in the Bering Sea, and I don't yet know anything about Siberian snow cover. So until I have that information, I have to be looking at the tropical features moving forward. And this is what they're telling me. Straight up and down, we talked about this extensively on Friday. That's your subsidence. So there's rising motion here in phase 1 of the MJO. So we're talking about in this area, a little bit over phase 8, and some here over the Americas. And that's straight up and down, which tells me it's rigid. It's not really going anywhere. And it's stuck in place. And I just say it might be stuck in place for a long time, giving us better chances in October and in November of developing troughs here. So what happens to that ridge I mentioned a moment ago? Maybe it moves east. And this would be the setup. Our wave train would just come screaming around like that. And you got 4 waves, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an open pattern. It moves, it progresses. And that's why I still think we have an active fall time period ahead of us, maybe 1 system a week rolling through. That's still the argument I'm going to make. Now, the ECMWF long range is trying to keep troughs here and here. And I just don't agree with it for most of October into November. I think you should take this and shift it east. I think we're going to see more of these troughs coming into the west, not just staying in this area. And that's going to change this pattern up quite a bit. So when you look out there at the new European weeklies from the 16th of October to the 15th of November, that 30-day window, I would look at this and say, yep, I do agree with wetter conditions here, but I do not think it's as dry as advertised in the models through the rest of the country. I think we do get systems rolling through at times delivering precipitation. Okay, that's my big picture. Does it make the river recover? No, I think it takes at least a month for that river to recover, maybe longer. I'm talking about the Mississippi, but this is the latest guidance I've got. I'm going to ask you to go back and watch Friday's video if you need the long range, because I'm already pretty deep into this one, but I'm going to talk a lot in that video about the Indian Ocean dipole, El Nino, and the MJO riding over the top of it, and what I think that's going to do to be kind of developing what's going to happen this winter. This winter, I made a lot of comments about analogs. What's making this particular winter a difficult analog to find is how warm the North Atlantic is and the North Pacific at the same time. So those two things, you can't just search back and find lots of years where it was so warm here and here. And then remember, we still have this negative PDO signal to be talking about and this negative PMM. So this is going to be a very unique winter. What I want to know is this, is the warmth that pushes into these parts of our global oceans going to influence where the coldest air dips? Will it be North America? Will it be Asia? Will it be Scandinavia? I mean, where's it going to be? And that's still a question I think that's up for debate going forward. All right, from there, as we finish this one up, I just want to give you a quick recap. This is the November, December, January outlook from the European model. And while I agree with what I see east of the Rockies, I don't agree with what I see west. I actually think we're going to see colder and wetter conditions in the west than currently being advertised for November, December, January. Just based off of what I've seen lately, I think that the jet stream is ready to outdo what El Nino typically gives it. I actually agree more with this. This is the new NMME forecast. And you notice how it is not as aggressively dry for the west. I think this makes a lot of sense, November, December, January. I would show you temperatures, but I'm going to tell you something. They're going to be so volatile this winter that giving you a blanket view of what the temperatures are going to do isn't going to make any sense to me or anybody else. Now, from here, I'm going to give you some updates on South America. We got new planting progress from Mato Grosso. They are above their 5-year average by about 2%, but they're off by 4% from a year ago. October is the big month. That's when they're going to plant pretty aggressively through here. Now, you can look at some of the longer range forecasts, and they all just suggest there's going to be drier conditions. But what I'm looking at here is week by week and looking at recent rainfall, where I just see that the moisture is there and it's enough to get things going. So this is your newest forecast. We're seeing the same thing we talked about last Friday. There will be adequate rains in through here to continue planting. The driest region in Brazil is going to be the northeast, like Bahia, this little corner of Bahia right in through here. By the way, that little box I drew, that's like the size of Indiana. That area, I'm expecting to be struggling with drier conditions, and over in parts of Tocantins and maybe a little bit into Goiás. But Mato Grosso do Sul, Minas Gerais, Paraná, plenty. In fact, there's too much rain down here, continuing to cause flooding problems in Santa Catarina, southern Paraná, and northern northern Rio Grande do Sul. Argentina, you see some moisture in here, but we're down in these colors. Like, that's a ½ inch. That's not a lot to undo this long-standing drought, which we just continue to watch in that area. New root zone soil moisture values just continue to be so very low here, but also up in Bahia and parts of Minas Gerais as well. So let's just watch this. This is an important story going forward with this drought in Argentina. And lastly, I mentioned I got to be watching Siberia. It's very warm right now. This is an area where early season snowpack can often dictate the strength of high pressure cells across the Arctic. It can dictate what might happen early with the polar vortex, and it's a big component of northern hemisphere early snow cover. And it's so mild there right now, which means we'd have to just watch that to see how things evolve with snowpack in that part of the world. So we'll watch it together, and I'll talk to you again in the morning. Thanks.